Florida takes Alabama to the wire. Now, what kind of Gator football team do we see for the rest of 2021? We got David Waters on the line from Gators Breakdown right here at the Voice of College Football as Florida hosts SEC Eastern Division rival Tennessee. David, how you doing tonight?
Doing good, Mark. Doing good. Just getting now into the groove of football season a little bit.
Yes, and this team got its groove on in the second half and coming back from 21-3 down to really play a pretty inspired football game. Unfortunately, we didn't get to see what would have happened had the extra point been made. That would have set up just having to kick the extra point the next time around and possibly playing overtime with the Crimson Tide at the Swamp. To put into perspective this Florida performance and what you found out about this team that you were maybe unsure of or thought wasn't as good as what they proved to be against Alabama.
Yeah, I mean, 21-3, like you said, coming back. I think what we found out by the time that game went final is maybe the ceiling is a little bit higher for Florida than we thought. Now, you got to follow that up, of course. But everybody wondered how good this Florida team could be after you lose Trask, Pitts, and Tony. You get your first big test of the season, and in a way, you pass it, but it's still a loss. They've said all week there's no moral victories here. A lot of the fan base, look, we're the University of Florida. There's no such thing as moral victories, but you can take some good away from that performance. I mean, Florida outplayed Bama for 3/4 of that game. But my worry going into the game is exactly what happened. Florida got down, and I didn't think they'd be able to come back like they did come back. But, getting down, spotting Alabama 18 points, spotting the number one team in the country 18 points with the talent they bring to the table, you're not going to win that too many times, and you basically have to play flawless all throughout the rest of the game. And Florida almost did, as you mentioned, the missed extra point, the 2-point conversion. It was a combobulated mess, but if Emory Jones hands the ball off right away, it probably still works anyway. But he couldn't make the decision fast enough to hand it off to Malik Davis, and they get stopped there and lose by 2 there. But yeah, Mark, I mean, credit to the team for not quitting. It would have been easy to fold. Alabama goes and they'll get up on a lot of people and then step on their throat, and you can't come back from it. And Florida didn't go away from a game plan. They ran the ball. They controlled the line of scrimmage on both sides of the ball starting in the second quarter, and it almost brought them back for a victory. So there's a lot to take away from it on the positive side, but the negative side as well. Florida's got to get off the faster starts on defense. It's been an issue with Todd Grantham at defensive coordinator, and it's pretty much one reason, and probably the major reason you lost the game versus Alabama on Saturday there. So it's been a mess. It's been a bugaboo ever since he's been the defensive coordinator at Florida. I know you say, yeah, that's got to be fixed, but what can be done year 4 as he's the defensive coordinator at Florida for that to get better? So credit the comeback, of course, but you've got to also take a look in the mirror and see what you can still do better. Look, Alabama, if you want to play that team again, Alabama's going to get better throughout the season. Florida's going to have to do the same.
The note about Grantham seems to add up to a coach who comes into the game not as prepared as he should be for what he's seen on tape, but then he's able to adjust. To his credit, he's able to adjust in terms of what he sees in game, which is typically the more difficult thing to do than what he was planning for the entire week.
Yeah, and this game almost, in a way, I mean, it was a higher shootout last year in the SEC championship game, but almost follows the same script. Alabama gets up big. Florida fights their way back. There's a stretch there in the middle of the game where Alabama can't do anything on the Florida defense, but it's just a start. I mean, look, go back to last year's Georgia game. Georgia gets up 14-0, and Florida has to fight their way back and eventually just goes to blow out Georgia. But it's these slow starts against the better offenses on the schedule that I say you got to figure out, but now you may just have to live with it just because it's been so consistent there with Todd Grantham. Now, granted, second drive of the game, there's this phantom pass interference call on 3rd down versus Kyer Elam, and Florida should have got the ball right then and there. That was not pass interference, so they did get their stop, but the drive was allowed to continue, and you can't give Alabama an extra chance. You just can't, and you saw they go up 14-0 or 14-3 at that point there. But so they did get their stop, but you would like to see the adjustment that he made of daring Alabama to run the ball Florida was getting beat in the passing game, so they adjusted to play the pass, basically daring Alabama to run the ball, and that's when Florida's defensive line just took over. You would like to see that adjustment, as you said, in pregame, or that adjustment after the first drive, because it was clear. Mark, I said last week on Gators Breakdown, my Alabama preview, what you're going to have to stop is yards after the catch and yards after contact, and that's exactly what happened in the first quarter versus Alabama and their skill players. So I don't know what it is, Mark, about what he can't identify during the week. Does he start the defense the same every week, and offenses just know that and can take advantage of it early? Whatever it is, like I said, it's got to be fixed, but it's too consistent right now for you just to think there's going to be a magic wand waved and automatically it just goes away.
If somebody showed me this box score, took the names away, and said, this is the way this game's going to turn out, well, I would have said, Florida can't turn it over once, not get any turnovers, stay in the game. And then also to control the line of scrimmage on both sides of the line of scrimmage, hold down Bama's running game, and also be able to chalk up 245 yards on the ground themselves. That is pretty astonishing.
I mean, after the first quarter, Bama had 10 points the rest of the game, and then kind of going back to the defense. When Florida would score in the second half, Bama would come right around and respond. There's another, chink in the armor on the defense was, you had the momentum. The momentum's going your way. You could have stopped after Florida scores a touchdown. You got to go make another stop and put your team and give your offense another chance to even take the lead at that point. But when Florida would score in the second half, Alabama would respond as well. So, but all in all, still, you can take some good from it. The defense, I think they did prove that they can really rely on that defensive front. A lot of veterans are coming around. Zach Carter, Jeremiah Moon, those transfers that they brought in with Valentino and Truesdale and Newkirk. Those guys all made plays. Gervin Dexter, the true freshman from last year, was a 5-star. Got thrust into the action. He probably played his best game as a Gator versus Alabama. So you found out Florida is strong up front. Alabama wanted to test Kyer Elam all game for whatever reason. He didn't really give up all that much for the game either. So it's just that start that did Florida in. But you did see a lot of good for this Florida defense. And maybe that's what they can build on. Maybe they did find something starting in that second quarter there that they can build off of and start getting faster starts.
David Waters, Gators Breakdown. Head over to your favorite audio platform or right here on YouTube. Just look up Gators Breakdown. Check out David's show. It is the best on Florida football coverage. Taking on Tennessee, old familiar foe this week. Tennessee comes in at 2-1. Basically, they've played one team with a pulse, and they lost by a touchdown to Pitt at home and gave up 41 points in that game. Florida comes in, obviously, at 2-1 with much respect. And it's not a moral victory, but you got to evaluate the play. And the play was that they outplayed what I would still consider the best team in the country in the second half. Took it down to the wire. You brought up, before we started to record, Anthony Richardson's health status. What do we know before I follow that up with the next question?
Pretty right now, kind of the same as last week. Mullen said today in the SEC teleconference that it looks good. He expects him to play Saturday. So we'll see what that means. Mullen was kind of coy about it all last week as well. And then right before the game, well, he's going to be using emergency situations. You still didn't really know whether to believe him right before the game or not anyway. The third drive comes along when Anthony Richardson usually gets his series, and Emory Jones is the quarterback out there. So you could take Dan Mullen for his word last week. We'll see game time if we can take Dan Mullen's comments this week going. He said he'll get another MRI Friday. That's what he did last week too. Got an MRI the day before the game. And as long as Mullen says, as long as there is, not a lot of risk of re-injuring himself, he'll play there. So your most explosive player by far, and that's saying how good he is. Florida's got some explosive players on their roster. That's just how good Anthony Richardson is. He is the most explosive player Florida has there. So you like to see kind of how they're setting it up. Do they want to get him healthy enough for him to start, where not start, but start playing more at Kentucky next week, where probably a lot more difficult of opponent coming up, more so than Tennessee? Or do you want to get him warmed back up a little bit, get him in the groove of the season again, playing him against Tennessee? So very interesting how Florida will play it. I think if he can play, you play him. I just think he's explosive. You put him on the field. The offense is just different with him. But we'll see what Mullen has to say throughout the rest of the week and what they say, pregame on Saturday.
So do you think Dan Mullen's perfect scenario is that Emory Jones is the starting quarterback throughout a successful season, and Anthony Richardson's a guy that comes in that runs certain plays and certain packages to complement that, or that Anthony Richardson wins this job because he is a more explosive player?
I think in an ideal world that Emory Jones has been here, you want him to keep progressing and keep taking those steps as a starter, and you insert them both. I think there is a path. There is a way both can play and play a lot of snaps and be successful here this season. But, I mean, you talk to enough people, Mark, enough people closer to me than the program, and there is a big thought that Anthony Richardson just takes over at some point this season because he is that good. But, health comes into it. Mullen has said time and time again, there's things that we aren't seeing, but that's outside of the explosive plays, getting the team in the right play, getting the team in the right check. Well, he still find a way to make up for those things a lot of the times. Though, granted, it's been versus FAU and USF, and that's one reason I wanted to see him versus Alabama. Is, okay, what does he do when the talent ramps up? And with the game plan Dan Mullen put in last week, you'd have to think that Anthony Richardson gets some explosive plays, and especially because Bama was just getting beat up front. And you give Anthony Richardson a crease like, Malik Day or Emory Jones himself got some creases and made some really good runs, and the running backs as well. You give him that type of crease, and, Florida did have now, you go in that second half of that Alabama game, those were some long drives. Those were 10, 11 play drives. Well, if Anthony Richardson's in one of those and that drive turns into a 5-6 play drive, you might have more time at the end to mount a comeback instead of just that last play where Emory Jones gets hit and, Florida can't amount to anything. Maybe you have an extra minute. Maybe you have an extra 2 minutes because you have another explosive player on the field and you score faster in one of those drives. So that's what he brings to the table there, Anthony Richardson. But I do think Dan Mullen be fine in either scenario. He kind of did mention a couple weeks ago that, maybe one of these guys just grab it by the horns and run away with it. Eventually this season, that might be Anthony Richardson, but also I think, we did see Emory Jones get better from game 1 to game 2 to game 3. And then a lot of it too, Mullen built a game plan. He's seen enough of what Emory Jones can do well. You've seen enough of what he can't do well. You use his legs a lot more versus Alabama. That's going to make him a lot more comfortable of a quarterback. So, I think, we're seeing Dan Mullen piece this offense together with Emory Jones at quarterback as well. And I do think Florida can win a whole lot of games with both of those guys playing a lot of football this year.
We know better than to look ahead to certain weeks and certain games because there are upsets every week. Yeah. And Florida, just because they played a great second half, hasn't arrived as, some elite team necessarily. Maybe they will at some point, but certainly
too. Don't just because you lost to 2 points to Alabama, don't sit here and okay, well, we're 2 points less than Alabama. But yeah, you were last Saturday. You got to keep doing it.
Absolutely. And so, sure, Tennessee should be a win. But then again, it's got to be played. Kentucky's obviously a formidable opponent on the road. LSU, all those teams before Georgia. But does it get the since we can be thinking ahead and talking about the hypotheticals and the what ifs, just a reset or a rethinking of what is possible in this matchup against Georgia and winning the East?
Mark, I think it maybe even how you think about the whole SEC. When we started this season and we're at SEC Media Days and we're making our votes and stuff, it's clear that it's Alabama and that it's Georgia. Well, last Saturday was any indication. You got to throw Florida in that mix too, with a 2-point loss to Alabama. So, we'll see how the season plays out. But if you want to just take that as the only data point we have right now for teams that you thought would be at least top half of the SEC, well, it's closer than a lot of people thought. So, then you fast forward a few weeks, about a little over a month away, and Florida, Georgia meet in Jacksonville. And look, even before the season, we thought the East would come down to that game. Kentucky beats Missouri, so you throw Kentucky into that mix now as well for the SEC East. But Florida plays Kentucky before they play Georgia. So we'll get a better sense of where Florida is. You already got a loss to Alabama. You can't afford another loss going into that game in Jacksonville. Georgia's schedule maybe got a little more difficult than we thought preseason. Arkansas has come up, and that's going to make Georgia's schedule a little bit tougher. I think Auburn might be a little further along than we thought they would be under Harsin. Go ahead and play Penn State very tough this past week as well. So that Georgia schedule may be a little tougher than we thought. Not as hard as Florida's, but it has stepped up a little bit in difficulty there for Georgia. So, we'll see what Georgia has rolling into that week as well. They still have a lot of questions they can't answer on offense till they play another team that you think can bring it to them a little bit after we look through what Clemson has done after week one as well. So I think there's still a lot of questions, Mark. For Alabama, is that an indication, have they fallen down, or is that more of an indication that Florida has risen up? And for Georgia, there's still a lot of questions with their offense after that Clemson game. I think no questions for defense, except for that back end, but their front seven probably makes a whole lot up there for that back end on Georgia. So I still think we got to play this season just a little bit more. But I do think from preconceived preseason notions, maybe Florida, you throw them into that mix with Alabama and Georgia as well.
And so with Tennessee coming up at the Swamp, can't look past anybody, but any real concerns based on what you've seen out of Tennessee?
Up-tempo offense scares me with Todd Grantham as defensive coordinator. That's how teams have been able to take advantage a lot of Todd Grantham is running up-tempo. Now, a lot of it is up-tempo with a good quarterback, and I'm not so sure Tennessee has with Hendon Hooker and Joe Milton. You've seen a different style between those two guys so far in the season. Milton's got a cannon of an arm, has the potential, but he can't. Mark, he's got such a big arm, he can't put any touch on it. He's overthrowing almost every deep ball out there. I think he'd connect on a few of them. This Tennessee offense would be – I think you'd be looking at it just a little bit deeper and maybe a little more worried. But until he proves he can hit a deep ball, we don't even know if he's going to play Saturday or not. He's injured, but still something to look for. We'll see what that means. And Hooker just a little more conservative as a passer, but they both like going down the field there. He has played versus Pitt when Milton got injured and had his start last week there. But it's that up-tempo speed offense there I think you worry about with Josh Heupel there against Todd Grantham. And for Florida on offense, Mark, I think there's a potential for some big explosive plays early in the passing game. I think now what Florida's done these first three games and been able to come out here and prove they can just run the ball, I think defenses are going to now start strategizing and game planning to stop that Gator run game. Well, you still got Jacob Clippin. You still got Xavier Henderson on the outside. I think that could lend itself to some play action or teams that is going to go ahead and just stack the box at the beginning of the game so Florida doesn't get in the groove in that run game and really leave some one-on-one matchups there for those Gator receivers and see if those quarterbacks can make a big play there.
Hendon Hooker turned in a really nice season 2 years ago for Virginia Tech, 13 TDs and 2 picks, and he's a running threat. Joe Milton, when he signed at Michigan, I looked at his completion percentage in high school. It was 47%. And I thought either his receiving core is dropping more passes than any high school team in America, or there's something wrong here. Yeah. And he's done nothing but confirm that ever since. I went to Michigan, pretty much had the same completion percentage at Michigan. I saw him throw a ball a couple weeks ago. I don't know who they were playing. Maybe it was the Pitt game, where he threw the ball like it landed practically in the third row. He was throwing a ball to the back of the end zone, and he just sailed the thing.
He's got a cannon. There's really very little control with that cannon. So, maybe you just line him up on the 10-yard line and see if he can throw an 80-yard bomb there if you're Tennessee. But that does if he can get that under control. He's a running threat too, big-bodied, physical type of quarterback that can make some tough, hard-nosed yards there in the running game, but very limited when it comes to passing.
Absolutely. At 51% thus far this year. That's pretty much his ceiling based on what he's shown us thus far. David Waters, Gators Breakdown. Again, if you love Florida football, the SEC, college football, want to keep up with the big brands, check out David's work there at Gators Breakdown right here on YouTube or on your favorite audio platform. David, we always appreciate you stopping by. You know that. Have a great week.
Thanks, Mark.